Welcome to episode 99 of the Necronama.com. I am James Sabata, horror author, screenwriter, co-host of the podcast you're listening to right now, and I'm not at all concerned about AI taking my job, because only an idiot would do the things I do.
And I am Don Guillory, author, historian, educator, co-host of this podcast, and sometimes I wonder what is real and what's not, and this movie made me question a few more things.
You know who is real, as far as I know? William Johnson is our guest today. And William, correct me if I'm wrong, you're human, right?
Are you attracted to me?
Well, not yet, but, ask me again at the end of the episode. Let's see where this goes.
I am real. I am very real. My name is William Johnson, and I'm honored to be on this podcast, even though as the seconds tick by, I'm starting to regret the decision immensely, but that's okay. We'll cut that out.
That's just because you talked to us for 15 minutes before we came on here. And yes. And people always regret that. They're like, what have I gotten into?
Yeah,
so.
You guys are awesome. Thank you so much for having me on. I am author ? I mean, if people, it's kind of like the theory of if a tree falls in the woods and no one can hear it, doesn't make a sound. I've written 2 books, but if no one's read it but your mother, does that count as a book? I don't know.
Yes, absolutely.
Okay, well, I've written a couple books. We won't go into that. So I guess I am an author. I am a film critic for 25 years later, and the network of websites. They're horror obsessive, sports obsessive, and I'm just kind of a general film vagabond. I make appearances with some friends here and there, and just kind of had a good time discussing films with people.
Very cool.
Awesome.
So you write about some sports. Did you, by any chance, get to cover the Super Bowl this year? Because I feel like you would have had an interest in that.
Yes. Many people do or do not know because I show them my tattoos whenever I get a chance. And I've been wearing some basically the same T-shirt and hat for the last about a month or so. But I'm a huge Tampa Bay Buccaneers fan. Obviously, our 18 years of being in prison, fan prison, ended. We won a Super Bowl. We had to sell our souls to the devil and get Tom Brady to do it, but we did it, and we're okay. I'll take it.
Well, I will say congratulations to your team and to you and your fandom.
Oh, well, thank you. I appreciate that. It's very, the toughest part about it now is that whenever someone sees me with my championship hat on or my Bucks mask, where I wear my mask in the store or whatever, everyone's just like, so when were you really a fan? And I'm just like, you knew the crap I had to go through my entire life for this team. Don't even get me started.
No, man, I was the ultimate Brady hater. I grew up a Jets fan, right? So when you want to talk suffering, I had the 1-in-15 seasons and shit like that. And I know Detroit's got it worse, but you get so beat down and you're still loyal, right? And Brady just made me hate football. And when he went to Tampa Bay, I realized my problem was never Brady. It was them together, because now I don't care. And I'm like, cool, whatever. So there you go.
you can tell it's kind of like someone that was married for a really long time was kind of not satisfied, but was like, they're not going to rock the boat. They're just going to go with their lot in life because there's some success there. Mm-hmm. And as soon as he let go of the Patriots, he turned into a different person. Like Tom Brady.
He's fun.
He was fun and funny, and he was making dad jokes, and his Twitter was hilarious, and he was poking fun at himself, and he was just like, whatever, we're going to win. Don't worry about it. And it was just so easygoing and kind of it was kind of, like Thanos says, I'm inevitable. It was just inevitable that this was going to happen. Even during November when we were losing 3 out of 4, it was just we'll figure it out. It was kind of a weird feeling to have.
So yes, everybody's enjoying our football podcast, and
that was the last thing I expected to be talking about, because I was just like, if you're going to open up that Cenobite box, you can do that, but.
I feel like we're still covering horror. We're still talking about Tom Brady. So,
yeah, that's true.
Well, they did make those nice promos where he looked like Dexter.
He could be an example of artificial intelligence as well. So it fits in.
Yeah, my mom never watches football. All she knows is that the Buccaneers suck, and she makes fun of me about it my whole life. And she watched the Super Bowl, and she was texting me things that I've never heard uttered from her mouth. So it was just kind of like an AI learning a new language or something. But she was, one of the things she kept saying, she was like, that Tom Brady is just a robot. And I'm like, yeah, he's just he's just programmed in multiple techniques, and like he just knows what he's doing. I don't know what it is. He's a robot.
Well, he passes the Turing test.
But let's jump into the film a little bit. So, William, this is the part where I get to ask you, why did you pick this film?
Ever since I was a little kid, I'm not a scientist at all. I'm not what you would call smart about things, except movies and Star Trek and Marvel and stuff. But things that are really important. But one thing that's always fascinated me was the concept of artificial intelligence and the concept of like what a soul is, like what makes us human. Couple that with the fact that Data from Star Trek: The Next Generation was a major part of my growing up, from the time I was 5 or 6. The whole idea of what humanity is has always fascinated me, especially in the sci-fi vein, because especially as time has gone on with the world we live in, and I think it's exacerbated even more by the pandemic, our relationship with technology has influenced our humanity in a lot of ways. So I've always been fascinated with that kind of subgenre of science fiction and how it affects us in the real world, because we're almost like machines ourselves. I mean, we're joking about Tom Brady being a machine, but like we actually can be like machines. And sometimes there's more humanity in, say, like a CGI Gollum in Lord of the Rings than like people that I know in real life. So that kind of storytelling has always fascinated me. And Ex Machina was one of those films that just blew me away. Like it was one of those things where when I saw it, I bought the screenplay and I read it. I got deep into Alex Garland land in terms of all the stuff that he does, trying to understand where he comes from, where did he get these ideas? And I just think it's a fascinating tale of, in the end, seduction of the technological world that we live in that's slowly overtaking us. So I picked Ex Machina because I think it's probably next to Blade Runner 2049, which I think is my ultimate film in terms of exploring the soul of like what a human being is. Ex Machina is like 1A or 1B on that chart. So I wanted to, and you guys hadn't seen it, so I was just like, oh, you guys got to see this, and let's do it. So that's why I picked it. Very cool. Saying I haven't seen it isn't impressive. I'm the guy that didn't see Jaws till we covered it, so what the fuck do I know? Hey, that's okay. There's always a blind spot somewhere. Someone's got a blind spot. I'm sure there's something I haven't seen that, someone's going to be like, what? So there's no shame in that. I mean, there's too many movies out there,
You just get to enjoy it for the first time. That's the way, I try to explain it, because I used to be one of those annoying people who would say, like, what do you mean you've never seen whatever, right?
Used to be.
But yeah. But House. So
we just covered House last week. What are you talking about?
I was like that with Jaws. But no, it was one of those things that I break myself from looking at it that way. If somebody didn't see a movie, we weren't living together, working together, going to school together to where I could introduce that to you if you hadn't seen it. So yeah, a lot of time is going to go by. And so what a lot of people need to realize is, if somebody's seeing for that for the first time and they haven't seen it, that is your job at that moment to speak the movie up. Like, why you would be excited, as opposed to, oh my God, I can't believe you haven't seen it. And it should turn into, oh my gosh, you're going to love it. Like, I wish I could see it for the first time again. Like, I love that movie. It's great. Like, I probably watch, James mentioned Jaws. I probably watch Jaws every summer, at least once or twice. Guaranteed I'm going to see it. But, even when I watch, I try to think back to when I was a kid and like how scared I was of the movie. And I look at it as an adult now, and you have a different perspective. I mean, that's really the only thing that's going to change is your life experience is going to determine how you react to the film, as opposed to whether or not the film is good or not. The film is going to be good one way, it's going to be good or it's going to be bad. But right. Your reaction as far as to the elements and things that are brought up in the film are going to be gauged or going to be determined by your life experience or personal trauma or anything that happens to you. and I say the same thing with this film. I was supposed to screen it, but there was like a conflict at the time, so I didn't get to screen it at the time. I would have seen this movie completely differently in 2014, 2015 when it came out, as opposed to where I am in 2021, considering where we are with technology and where we are with this whole idea of, what the hell is humanity? Because they're human beings that we can't argue. I mean, objectively, we can make an argument about the level of what determines humanity, but subjectively, we could argue somebody isn't embracing those things that I define as humanity. So there's a lot there in this film, and again, I'm glad that you recommended this film, or at least selected this film for this episode, because I probably would have gone another month or maybe a couple more years before, it happened to be on at a time where I was sitting there and said, oh shit, let me just go ahead and watch this movie.
Yeah. You're dead on about I kind of think of not the plot or material characters or anything, but I remember one of my professors in college said about King Lear. King Lear is the kind of story that you read every 10 years and you get something different out of it, because as you get older, you identify with different characters in that play, to the ultimate point where you get old and then you identify with King Lear himself. This is the kind of movie where I watched it when it came out, and I've watched it throughout the years, and it always hits different, because it's almost like this film was predicting where we would be. It was ahead of its time in a way, because, like I said, like you said, when you watch it in 2021, where we are with technology is so much different, but yet the themes that are emphasized in Ex Machina are so pronounced, and they only seem to get more interesting and engaging as time goes on. So this is definitely a movie, like, if you haven't seen it, I think that all good art is going to last. That's why you can watch something like Jaws, which is over 45 years old now, 50 years old, and it still hits. Ex Machina seems like it will be that way as long as we are currently living in the society that we live in, that is reliant on technology.
Right.
Yeah, I definitely agree with that.
I think the only thing that probably would change is, let's say 20, 30, 50 years, somebody looks back at this movie and is like, that's what they thought androids were going to look like? Those fucking morons.
Well,
all the androids will laugh together.
Yes, exactly.
That reminds me of that joke from News Radio where I guess they got transported into the future, and Joe Rogan asks, well, who won the World Series the last 30 years? And it goes, Dodgers, robots, 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 and it goes on and on and on. It's kind of like, yeah, that's what's going to happen, is all those androids will laugh at us while they basically sit on a throne of skulls that they've made of us. So
good for them.
Throw them a crumb. Let them have one of these World Series championships.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
We've got to use them to power our system.
Somehow the Royals won this year. I can dream. All right. So one of the big things, like, since you're talking souls and humanity and all that, one of the biggest things to me is just the constant God talk, right? But not even this is the history of gods, which I'm sure we'll get to in a minute. But I want to take this a step further and look at it solely as Adam and Eve, because there's so much Adam and Eve imagery here. Ava's name, Ava, Eve, very close. Some countries, they're kind of the version of each other, right? And outside of her window is a tree, and outside is the knowledge that she doesn't have, the experience that she wants, right? Mm-hmm. And they bring in Adam, and yeah, Adam arrives second, so a bunch of Christians are like, wrong! No. Anyway.
Use his rib, damn it!
No, but he automatically assumes he's better, because he's actually human, and she's Pinocchio, right? And so you have this Adam and Eve thing going on, and this whole buildup, and there's all these constant reflections. Like, they'll be looking at each other like they're looking in a mirror, or there's a ton of mirror imagery, and glass is always involved. I mean, he even calls it Through the Looking Glass, which is Alice going through a mirror, literally switching places with her reflection, which is what Ava does here, right? Like, she switches places. Also, that pilot's a fucking idiot if he was expecting a guy named Caleb. I'm just saying. But so like there's so much of this I'm God and I've created her and I brought you here. Like in a way he's created Caleb, right? Like he has given him a job. He's given him an existence because it doesn't seem like Caleb has much outside of this. Otherwise he wouldn't be so easy to get rid of. And just he's given him a purpose. And I don't know. I like this whole Garden of Eden kind of thing going on here. What do you guys think about that?
I actually never thought about
talking to English majors.
Yeah, that's very interesting. I actually never thought of it from that perspective, and that's very fascinating. I defer to you on that. I mean, that's pretty interesting. I never thought about the tree thing. They do kind of mention at one point the whole idea of like when a computer becomes human by studying color and then seeing color, and that kind of reflects what you're talking about too, about basically outside is that tree of knowledge, you know, that she's aspiring to, but she can't really be human until she does experience it, but she's kind of doomed to always just be in black and white instead of color, that kind of thing. But that's a fascinating perspective. I never really thought about it that way.
Well, and then you get into the thing that Caleb says where he's like, if you've created a conscious machine, that's not the history of man. That's the history of gods. Right. Like, and that's a very apt thing. Like it is, creating AI is about creating life. It's literally about playing God. And then, you know, Nathan flips it because in his head, he heard, I am God. And I really liked that. I thought that was a great characterization piece, but just that's what really like set me down this path was the I am God and I'm her father and, you know, that kind of thing. And you're the first man she's ever seen. And I mean, she's literally, she doesn't take a rib bone from Adam, but she does take abdominal skin from one of the dolls. I'm calling them dolls. I don't have a better name for them.
Oh, that makes sense. I mean,
anyway,
for the purposes of Nathan's designs, I mean, basically those first ones are basically living dolls, you know, so it makes sense.
Right. I when you bring up the whole God complex itself, I think Nathan already feels like that. But it's great to have somebody who confirms it for him, despite all the stuff that he says when they first come in. Because when Caleb shows up, Nathan makes this whole thing about like, hey, this isn't boss and employee. You know, I'm talking to you, you know, one man to another man. I want to, you know, because if it's going to be all tense and stuff, we're not going to have a good week. Basically, it's going to be a week where we can't get shit done. So drop all that stuff at the door. So you see how that he opens, or at least makes him feel welcome. With the way that he's speaking to him, treating him. And this would be a situation a lot of people, when they are, you know, with their employer, with their manager, whoever it is, you look at it like, okay, well, this is a cool opportunity for me to put my guard down, or at least they're putting their guard down, putting their defenses down to make me feel comfortable. What can I do to actually engage in a productive conversation, but still have those barriers built up? Because after the week is over, he goes back to being my boss.
Right.
So you automatically see that tension that Caleb is going through, or at least that uncertainty that he's feeling at that moment, because he doesn't know what the hell he's there for. He just knows that, hey, he's been invited to, you know, his boss's private island that apparently he had been flying over for 2 hours before he even got to the actual estate, which my wife laughed about it. She's like, this is dumb. Like, it's like, you 2 hours? Like you've been on this helicopter for 2 hours. Then of course they get off the helicopter. And it's like, all right, this is as close as I can get to the house. You have to walk. And she's like, I don't like where this is going at all. I don't like this at all. But you see how he's, you know, Caleb himself is starting to see have this distance built up, right? There's 2 hours of a helicopter ride from the end of the estate, right? Right. Then there's so far that the helicopter pilot can go. So now this other barrier is put up, and Caleb has to go out by himself to go find the, you know, where Nathan happens to be living. But as soon as you get there, it's kind of like, hey, you know, everything's cool. You can go wherever you want that this card will let you. So you notice that there's a little bit of boundaries and barriers that have been knocked down because he's so much closer to Nathan. But then there's still these things where he's going to be restricted from. So Nathan, despite this speech of, hey, we're just going to be two guys working together on a project. It's not boss, it's not an employee. I brought you here for a reason. But there are certain places you can't go in my house. Anything else is cool. And you can attribute that to as, if you're somebody's house guest, there are going to be places that, yeah, I'm not going to fucking go because this is your house because I know not to go there.
Right.
But you're giving me a key card that's going to tell me. So I think it's, it's really interesting the way that Nathan structures this relationship early on where he's controlling him, not in the same regard as he's controlling the AI androids, but he's controlling him like another thing. He's there to serve a purpose, just like the AI androids are there to serve a purpose. There are places they can't go.
Yeah.
Unless you're Kyoko.
Right. And the interesting thing about Nathan, which I think why he's a great character, is exactly what you're saying. He's very complex, like complexly written.
Right.
Because, like you're saying, he has like these boundaries, but he's also trying to be like, it's almost like he's a robot himself too, because he's like, yeah, I'm just a bro drinking beer. Let's hang out. And then it's like, don't go in that room. And I'm watching everything you do because Nathan does have this like cameras everywhere, including in Caleb's bedroom. So he is controlling him that way too, because there's a scene much later on where Caleb thinks he's a robot. So he cuts open his arm and like, Nathan's like, yeah, I saw that, like, it's like, whoa, wait a minute. But also the interesting thing about Nathan to me is he does have that God complex where he thinks he is God and stuff. But I think he is in a way tortured by that too, because he's always getting drunk off his ass and kind of trying to get out of reality. Like, because he's living far away from people. He doesn't know how to interact with people anymore. Mm-hmm. He's basically numbing himself through alcohol and probably drug use and some kind of stuff. It's almost like there's that pressure. There's like an unstable nature to him, but there's also like a little bit of fragility and a little bit where you kind of are ambiguous about him. Like, you're like, do I trust this guy? I'm not sure. It's a pretty fascinating, is he truly a villain or not? It's kind of a really well-balanced character.
Well, even when you talk about the complexity of him and this idea of the God complex that he has for both of you, I found that very interesting when he's talking about how he was able to create things like the facial expressions. Or at least the create the faces for the android, or at least at the early point, since Caleb only knows about Ava, how Nathan is able to create that face, and he says, "Oh, well, from their conversation, you as a viewer, you understand that he has basically hacked into everybody's phone around the world using his software and used their cameras, used the mics and all this other stuff." To figure out like, the voices and facial expressions, things like that. And then he casually says like, well, the phone companies couldn't tell on me because if they did, they'd be telling on themselves because they do it all the time. And it's kind of like this whole thing like, I got away with this shit because, hey, I'm the guy who created, what was it, Blue Book or
Blue Book, yeah.
I'm the one who created this. So because I created this monster, I was able to do what I wanted to with my creation into all these other areas, into all these other creations to get the data I needed to create another creation. So, I mean, he's God in several different arenas.
Yep.
Here's my take on Nathan. Number one, he's completely the hyper masculine, toxic masculinity. Mm-hmm. Women are just decoration, right?
Yep.
But I have this theory that Nathan did not create the AI, not purposely.
Okay.
And my reasoning is, number one, okay, so he made Blue Book, right? When he was 13, okay? So I feel like he's one of those prodigies that made this thing and then could never live up to it again, right? That's why he's always drunk. That's why he's always depressed. That's why he's trying to make up for it by being physically perfect, but he can't interact with other people, so he lives all the fuck alone. Which, where does he get his food and his beer? I don't know. We'll come back to that. But we won't, but that's okay. But I feel like Blue Book did something and it pulled the data and the data created AI.
Okay.
And he doesn't know what to do with it. And he's trying to figure it out instead. And that's why he's going through all these things. Because if you watch those old videos where he's got the first prototypes, he doesn't look like a guy who's in charge. He doesn't look like a guy who made these things purposely. He looks like some fucking like a guy who encountered a tiger in the wild and he's trying to survive it. And then like he keeps building it and building it. And I'm sorry, but if you're really trying to make AI, you don't just make sex bots, okay? There's all this symbolism of the Jackson Pollock painting, and we keep coming back to it over and over and over. And the whole point of Jackson Pollock is that there's no fucking plan. It just happens.
Right.
And so for me, if he's this obsessed with Jackson Pollock, that's what fucking happened. Blue Book pulled the data from all these places and all these people around the world, and it built the AI instead. And also, he keeps talking about the singularity. And the whole point of the singularity is to be the one that gets there and makes the singularity. If you were this fucking close and you made these AIs, you would be shooting for the singularity to be the greatest human of all time. And no, he's fucking drunk and fucking Kyoko instead.
Yeah, there's... But Kyoko's an interesting character there for what you're talking about. Do you think that is when he got control of it? Because that's kind of the first, if you like you said, in the first couple videos, it seems like he's dealing with wild creatures and he's had to shut them down or kill them or whatever. Mm-hmm. Kyoko seems like a completely subservient robot.
Yeah.
And I was telling James off the podcast that the screenplay actually, the only big difference in the screenplay is that Nathan is more overtly sexual with Kyoko. Like there's actual sex scenes in the screenplay that I think might have just been a little too disturbing for them to add into the film. I think it would have taken away a little bit from some of the ambiguity. But as it's gone on, you have Kyoko, who kind of seems like that fembot, essentially. Mm-hmm. She's just there to serve and pleasure him. But then you have Ava, who, when you see the videos of him, he's not like having to physically restrain her or control her. He's using manipulation and kind of like emotional abuse. Mm-hmm. And he does seem to be in more control there. So do you think that at some point he was able to master because like I said, if the data built the AI, he had to have at some point mastered it himself in order to get a Kyoko or an Ava.
No, I don't mean to cut you off, but
sure. Yep.
I think Ava is the first one, and I think he's trying to figure out how to do it, and that's why he's making these things that he can't control that aren't on the same level. This is not evolution, as he calls it. Kyoko is not almost there. Kyoko's fucking brain dead.
Right.
So I think if Ava was the first, and these others are his attempts to make it, and he can't do it.
Well, then Ava even makes that comment to Caleb at one point when she's asking what's going to happen to her. And he says, gives this whole thing about the code and basically that she would be reformatted to where operationally she would work, but she'd lose the memories. So, I would definitely agree with you on that, James, because I hadn't thought about it before, at least made that connection as far as her being the first.
Like he could have been doing that to her, but that's not an answer for the other dolls.
Right.
That makes a lot of sense.
He's copying the code or adjusting the code to make the other AI androids the way that he wants them, which, again, gets into a whole lot of things about, controlling women, which I'm glad you brought up, because I was about to say, like, man, we're dancing around the issue here. We're dancing around the issue of, men controlling women, because you know, not that he has to make one, but there is that conversation with Caleb and Nathan where he asks him, like, why'd you give them sexuality? Or why'd you give Ava sexuality? Because he doesn't know about the other ones yet. But why'd you give Ava sexuality? And he says, why not, like a great box or something? And he gives some long-winded answer about why it happened this way or why you would do it. And then he talks about like, she flirted with you or you want to fuck them. And, by the way, there is this whole thing. You can fuck them, by the way, which goes back to this guy who hasn't necessarily matured. When you talk about evolution itself, he hasn't evolved as a guy.
Right.
Kind of like, yeah, I'm creating this really cool AI. I mean, as far as his argument, I'm creating this really cool AI. But by the way, you can fuck it. Ha ha. And it's like the same thing with the adult film, or I shouldn't say the adult film industry, but with technology itself. And I don't want to give the quote or attribute the quote to the wrong person, but they basically stated when it came to technology, it always comes back to sex. So if it was about VHS popularity, right? VHS themselves or home videos or whatever got really popular because this was a good way for people to hide the fact that they were watching porn because you don't have to go back. You don't have to watch it at the movie theaters anymore.
Right.
Or, even with and this gets into even why PlayStation was so successful. And I'm not saying PlayStation was generating porn. What I mean is because PlayStations themselves had DVD capability and then later on Blu-ray, because porn itself or the pornography industry was doing so well, they pretty much determined it was going to be DVD as opposed to Laserdisc. Because who the fuck is going to be carrying out a big ass disc that of a porn? So it's now like, hey, this is a really cool technology. It's really small. I can hide it. I can carry it on. And that's what the androids become. Even with the internet, for that matter, the number one. The sites, the number one amount of sites that are on the internet are attributed or associated with sex, the sex industry in some way, cams, video, porn, whatever. And when these first androids or these first dolls were being created, people were talking about, we can eventually turn these dolls into androids that will have sex with you and respond. And, there's no need to have a wife or there's no need to have a husband because you can now just get one of these and interact with it and shut it off when you don't want to be around it. And so that's what you see in this film where Nathan has these at his call, especially Kyoko, where he can use them for whatever he wants. And there becomes this idea of morality that gets involved as well, as far as like you're creating these things in an image that you see the value of women. They should be controlled. They should serve men. They shouldn't speak. I mean, because Kyoko never utters a word. And Nathan makes this whole comment about like, don't apologize to her when she spills something. Don't apologize to her. She wouldn't understand you anyway. She would just, she doesn't speak English. She doesn't, And so he goes to this whole thing of like, yeah, you can treat her however you want because she can't understand what you're saying. And even then, Caleb has this response where he's like, well, I'm pretty sure she can tell you're annoyed, you're aggravated, you're angry. And Nathan just brushes it off like, I don't give a fuck if she's angry, if she thinks I'm angry or not. I mean, he treats it as these are things. They don't lack humanity. And you can look at a lot of parts of history when you're talking about women, when you're talking about marginalized communities and groups, where that same argument is used. Like, they are not on the same level as me. Therefore, they're less than human. They lack any humanity. I can treat them however the hell I want.
It got me thinking, what you're saying got me thinking that this kind of idea, that concept, has technically jumped out of the technological world as well. In reality, I was thinking about, I had recently read a study about Japan. Japan is one of the few countries in the world that actually has a declining birth rate because people aren't getting married as much, and some of the getting married and having kids. And one of the major reasons behind that is there's kind of a social movement now, and some of this is generated by technology, but the men in Japanese society kind of don't like, and this is a generalization. I'm using just a study. I'm not saying this about all Japanese people, please, but a lot of the men don't have time to get married anymore because they find women intimidating, and they find luxury in these things called like idols and kind of online personalities that kind of fulfill their sexual and or attractive needs. And then the women, they have these clubs in Japan where like working women, because Japan has a lot of working women, they have these clubs where basically men, it's not like a strip club, but it's basically men act as their boyfriends for the night.
I've seen that.
Yeah, basically they get that part of the relationship satisfied, and then they go home. So you're having both sexes, and some of this is generated by technology because men are able to find groups of people through online group chats or things like that, and they kind of have these little communities, especially around like the idol community. I don't know if you guys are familiar with that. It's a music group that are usually like young girls, and there's kind of like this feverish adoration for them from these middle-aged men. And so, you have your meetups through your internet groups, but if I'm kind of connecting what you're saying, that whole idea of compartmentalizing humanity, having a sex robot basically is accounting for that arrested development in Nathan. And I'm starting to see that in the real world, absent of technology. So another thing that I think Ex Machina almost kind of predicts, you were talking about Nathan, being at like a base level, like a base sexual level, like if indeed the data created the AI and he's basically using them, for his creations for basically sex robots, it's that.
Well, and maybe he's trying to get there, but he hasn't. So that's all he's achieved. But
right.
Continue.
Exactly. But it's almost like he's kind of maybe accepted that, because like I said, he's got Kyoko kind of under his control. Ava, he doesn't, but he's got her in a cage, essentially. And it reminds me of The Social Network, too. The basis of Facebook, this massive world-changing technology was, at least according to the thesis of the film, does this girl like me? Like button.
Right.
So there's kind of like this base, like in like what's the word I'm looking for? Like instinct of simple pleasures, at play here, and I think it's exacerbated by the technology in this, but you're starting to see that in the real world too. It's we're kind of compartmentalizing our humanity in exchange for like certain social roles being, submitted to us piece by piece, or not in its wholeness. It's kind of, and I think with the pandemic, our relationship with technology is even more almost not romantic, but personal, because that's sometimes the only way you can communicate with people, and people.
Yeah, I remember.
Yeah.
Oh no, I was going to say we talked about the Super Bowl earlier, but one of the great things that we've seen are some really good Super Bowl commercials that kind of are funny. Right, we have the funny ones, you have the informative ones, but then you have the ones that make you go back and think about like, oh shit, is this where we are as a society? Yeah. Because I was looking at some of the older ones before, but then the ones that came up this year, the one that stands out to me was the Alexa commercial where they hired Michael B. Jordan, who is he's not hard to look at. So, this woman was thinking about like, these advancements, like what they could do with Alexa in the future. I'm probably getting the commercial all wrong as far as the premise of it, but she sees a billboard with Michael B. Jordan, and she immediately fantasizes about, Michael, you have your own Michael B. Jordan Alexa, right? So he's there with her, sweet talking, like she's having all of her like sexual fantasies through this device, or at least through this dream about this device where, she can take Alexa, where, this Michael B. Jordan Alexa. And without saying it, I mean, there is a lot of sexuality that gets used, and this idea of, Alexa's job is to start your music, your lights, order stuff for you from Amazon, whatever it is, right? Alexa's not supposed to turn you on. But even in that commercial, it's kind of like, well, shit, I'm sure there were people like Michael B. Jordan. That'd be great. But you know who I would want to be my Alexa? And so people then start to disassociate this idea that this is technology and then turn it into this could be my fantasy. And even with technology, you go back even further with the automobile. One of the big fears about the automobile for women in the 1920s, or at least with regard to women in the 1920s, is if women have access to automobiles, they'll be able to go away and have sex with who they want to.
Yeah.
So we can't let them have cars. Well, they were more concerned about them having, premarital sex. Which even this, you talk about that idea of control with Nathan, or at least this God complex that he has. I mean, whether or not Caleb, says it or not, he's already got it. You even throw in things like, well, hell, I'm going to go there. You've got Asian fetishization going on here as well. Like, because there are two Asian androids. And this guy seems like he might have been a weeb in a former life, before Nathan went to his own private island. But it seems like he's every, all those guys who are in love with Asian women, but just for the fact that they want to say something like, oh, they're exotic or something. Like, he seems like he's creating this thing to where it can fulfill not just his sexual fantasies, but also his sexual kinks. Because he even brings up that thing with Caleb. He was like, what kind of women you like? Black chicks? You don't know if you like black chicks or not. You just know that you're exposed to certain things and you realize, oh, I like black chicks. And I just found it so funny that he picked that. As far as when they're having that discussion about sexuality, when he has got his own thing. So, there are even racial, ethnic elements into this as well, where Ava's the white one, we're assuming white. She's the white one that he can't control, which I look at it like, son of a bitch. Like, you've got some really good social commentary with respect to race and gender, the intersection of race and gender with this, because so much of patriarchal societies, sorry, I'm going to get in a little lecture mode now. So much of patriarchal societies is about controlling women and the intersection of race, to where if you are, and we're assuming for this film, we're assigning him the identity of a white male, right? And the idea that he can control these Asian women or these women of color, he can't control the white one. And when it comes to patriarchal societies or Euro-patriarchal societies, so much that was about white males or white European males controlling women of color in any of the colonized world that they had, but they would not allow men of color to have access to white women. So I think it would have been really cool if Caleb had been, let's say he had been Hispanic. I mean, because Oscar Isaac is Hispanic, but if he had been brown, black, Asian, who had come in there and, he gets offended at the idea that Ava is flirting with him, because he's not upset that Ava flirts. He brings it out as this point of like, hey, this is proven that it's true. It's proven that it's working. Ha ha. Cool. Did she pass the test? Right. But I would have liked to have seen it.
Goes back to my theory.
Okay.
I think this 100% goes back to Ava being the first one. She's the only one kept in a cage.
Right.
Everyone else is able to go around, which means he can control them. He can't control her. I don't think it's a white thing, because he has a white blonde naked chick in his closet. So I think he's just trying every flavor, so to speak. And
there's just one that doesn't.
But we never see him attempt to sleep with her. We never see him attempt to touch her inappropriately. Like, at most, he does the little, that painting of God and Adam, like how God has his hand out. He kind of does that to Ava at one point, and that's the most. And that tells me she's different than the others. And I truly believe it's because she's the first and the others are the ones he created that he can control. And he views them as machines, and that's why he doesn't care. And that's why he can just fuck them because they're not real and it doesn't matter. And he can treat them like shit because they're not real. When he says she doesn't understand English, he means, hey, I haven't figured out how the fuck to make her talk yet. I haven't made her figure out. I haven't figured out how to make her react to things. And I think that's what he's really saying. And so when you say control, I really think it's because Ava is different. And I don't think he made her so he can't control her. If he created this, she wouldn't need to be locked up because he could put something in her to stop it.
Well, a couple things that I wanted to bring there, if I could.
Yeah, absolutely.
There's two things that make me question the theory, James, and maybe you can
please do.
Maybe you can tell me how I'm wrong, because I am buying into your theory, but there's two things that kind of pop up. One is towards the end of the movie, and I think this kind of explains Caleb's kind of instant uncomfortableness with Ava. I think Nathan at one point says that he programmed, or he admits that he programmed Ava to look like Caleb's pornography searches.
Yes.
So there's that, and then there's also the fact that there was the attempted breach of one of the robots, which you see on the camera, and there's the breakage in the glass. So at one point there was someone in that cage that tried to break out physically, because there's that big punch mark in the glass.
Okay, so my take on that would be that you're looking at her skin instead of her mind. And I think that her face being based on his porn doesn't matter because she can change her face anytime.
Right.
She can change her hair. She can change her clothes, blah, 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 blah. The past ones, I believe, are also her. I believe what he said about changing their bodies. Like, your body may not stay, but your mind does. And then I have to erase your memories. That whole speech, I think that's basically true. So I think it's been her breaking the glass, but maybe not in that body. Because I think it's fascinating that you would spend the time making all this flesh and whatever else for your others and not for your main creation. She gets a piece of a face and like some hands.
Right.
Does that make sense? Mm-hmm. So that would be my rebuttal, but I don't know that I'm right.
No. That makes sense. And one thing that I love that Garland did with this film is he kind of turned, and we're talking about sexual ideas in this film, he kind of turned the idea of seduction and voyeurism on its head a little bit. There's a scene where Ava puts on her clothes.
Yes.
And she kind of looks at the camera like she knows he's watching. And this is almost like a seductive thing. And I found that really fascinating because usually in a thriller or any kind of movie with the male gaze, you want to see the woman take her clothes off, but something about her becoming more human, putting the clothes on. They focused on that in a sexual kind of male gazy way, which I found really fascinating. And it was part of that seduction, that sexual element. Now, of course, there is a scene later when, she basically, Ava confronts Caleb and is like, hey, are you attracted to me? And he's like, that later on when he's watching her, she's taking her clothes off. It's almost like, yes, whether she was created first or last or whatever, she has that. And whether it was programmed or not, whether it came from the data on the internet, which is sex obsessed, or she's just a master manipulator, she has sex, like sexual seduction on her mind. And she uses it in different ways. And it's super fascinating. Like, I remember the first time I saw the film and she was putting her clothes on, I was like, why is this almost erotic? Like, it feels like I'm like basically with the cliches and tropes of a sexual scene of someone disrobing, put those things into putting the clothes on, that I found completely fascinating. Because I was just like, is she seductively putting a sweater on? You know what I mean? Like, when's the last time anyone's ever watched a movie and someone puts clothes on and you're like, huh, that's interesting. You know what I mean?
I wonder if it's like permission. Like, because before, oh, that's a machine. Like, I'm not going to put my dick in the vacuum. I know people have done it, but I'm not going to, right?
Right.
And so maybe like by putting on clothes and looking more human, it allows him permission to feel attracted to her. And so it's like opening that door and like making it okay. I don't know. I mean, I'm just spitballing, but
yeah. No, that makes perfect sense because, and that's part of why she's a true AI, is because she's been manipulating everybody from the start. And that is part of it, is she knows that maybe she knows through Caleb that he is in fact one of the good guys, if you want to use quotes, good guys, and that she can appeal to what Nathan saw in him as a loner with no girlfriend, has no family, kind of lives in this internet world in which pornography is a part.
Right.
And she can use, even as a robot with, her internal intestines showing and all this stuff, like she can still use sexuality to maybe at some point she knew that there's more of a father-daughter element to Nathan. And so she uses manipulation that way. Because we have noticed Nathan seems to be really angry and like kind of aggressive with her, but not in a sexual way. It's almost like he's dealing with kind of like a petulant child. At least that's what he thinks. So I think she's learning how to use certain aspects of the human nature to manipulate. She can anger Nathan. She can sexually arouse Caleb. And I'm fascinated to know what she says to Kyoko at the end, because she whispers something to Kyoko and Kyoko ends up stabbing the crap out of Nathan. So, is Kyoko...
I have a theory on that too. Yeah.
Yeah. Is Kyoko responding to just a base instruction, or is there some kind of data speak language that we don't understand between AIs? There's all kinds of fascinating things that Ava does in relation to every major character in this movie.
So my Kyoko thing really plays into my theory of how I would change the end of this film, which we're going to talk about in a while. Yeah. But I believe that she reprogrammed her. I believe that she did what he couldn't do, and she did it in Ava just reprogrammed Kyoko, and she did it in like 5 seconds while he's been wasting his life and can't fucking do it.
Oh, interesting.
And that goes back to my, if she was spontaneously made, or however you want to say it, right? Like, I feel like if Blue Book pulled all this data from everything, right? And then it somehow made her, I think she would know how to program. Like, she'd have the internet. She'd have all this access to information and stuff. And I think that she reprograms Kyoko and only reprograms her for what she wants, because Kyoko just does that and then stands there waiting for further instructions.
Oh, okay. Gotcha. Makes sense. Sure.
I don't know why the fuck she has a knife to begin with, but
Well, I mean, she's the one who's preparing the food and everything. So.
Oh, that's true. I'll give you that.
Because that looked like I'm trying to get better with my cooking knives, but that looked like it was a sushi knife. So maybe he wanted leftovers. Or whatever she made looked pretty good, and he wanted to have more.
Which brings up the thing about, we won't go into it, but how does he get his food, and who delivers it, and why does he have so much of it? He's got a lot of beer.
Why doesn't he have a helipad? You have all this land, and you don't have a helipad that parks anywhere near your house. Like, at least that would explain to me how you get your food and stuff. But
yeah. Well, we won't nitpick that. That's just part of it.
I will. That's what I do.
Look, he probably has an airdrop, somebody comes in and does their airdrop over his house, and then they
fly 2 hours each way.
Yeah.
But he's got like fresh salmon and stuff.
It was Postmates, man.
Maybe he's got other AI out there fishing for him and stuff. I don't know.
Well, you know what's weird is with the programming, because I'm not going to do the whole, hey, if you had a robot, what would you do? But it seems as though that would be something that he would start programming them to do, is if he's got Kyoko there to dance for him and have sex and, provide his food. I mean, he's basically trying to create that 1950s, stereotypical housewife. As far as like, these are the duties that you have. It almost seems like he would have, in creating all these other AI bots, to have some where their duty was to simply, cultivate, grow crops, do something. Because it seems like when we talk about things like a labor force and automating a labor force, it's always, hey, these are the jobs that can be done simply. We can program a robot to do it. In fact, the pizza place where I am, they just got a robotic pizza maker. So it's going to, it's supposed to clog up. I'm sorry, not clog up. It's supposed to clear up the clogs that they have with respect to prepping pizzas and everything like that and cooking the pizzas, so that the people that work there can just focus on delivering the pizzas and taking orders and things like that. So it just makes sense, or at least makes sense in my mind, that he would have had, for practicality's purpose, he would have had to start making some more bots that are just focused on, hey, you plant flowers and your job is to grow crops or herd goats or something, something, to where his island becomes inhabited by AI bots that take care of him and sustain his life, as opposed to the mystery of all the alcohol and everything that's there. Hey, I need you to start distilling some alcohol for me. I'm feeling in a very rummy mood right now.
It's funny. That's the other cool thing I like about Alex Garland, is he did this with his screenplay for Dread, and he did this with Annihilation. Mm-hmm. He doesn't go, like I said, I think a lesser director or a lesser writer would have done exactly what you're saying. Like, you would have gone to Nathan's place and it would have just been robots flying everywhere and doing all kinds of crazy shit. And it would be like a very sci-fi, predictable kind of thing. But the fact that you can glean that from maybe what Nathan's intentions are, as opposed to just seeing it, is more powerful.
Right. Oh, yeah.
And because, I think, like I said, he did this with Dread. Like, he didn't have like Dread going all over the city and blowing up buildings and stuff. It was very isolated within one apartment complex. With Annihilation, it was, you kind of got a little bit of the mystery going on, but like, it's not, you weren't seeing it on a global level. I think the fact that he isolates all of these concepts into something that's almost just a performance of 4 actors or 3 actors is a show of self-restraint and the possibility of what stories can be if you let them breathe on their own without just packing them full of stuff. I think like if like Ridley Scott made Ex Machina, we'd have, robots everywhere. I mean, I'm saying this because he directed Blade Runner, and that's one of my favorite films. I just think based on his most recent more output, like his Alien films and Prometheus and stuff, I think there would have been more fantasy elements to it and not as much cerebral nature to it.
And you know what? I think we might have answered, thinking about where we are in the world right now. It was 2015 for this film, 2021 right now, right? Yeah. If he's got his own island, I'm sure with the amount of wealth that he has, the amount of technology he has at his fingertips, he probably just has shit brought in on a drone.
Sure.
Or drones to where they come in, they drop the stuff off, because the helicopter pilot says that's as far as he's allowed to go. Right. Doesn't mean that no one else, there isn't something else that's going on there. But yeah, it's definitely good to have a minimalist approach to the excess technology that he would have access to, because it does make us question those things. But it also makes me question, because maybe I might have missed this, but it doesn't seem as though Nathan ever expresses what he intends to do with this technology.
Right.
It's just simply, hey, Caleb, what do you think? Caleb, what do you think? Okay, cool. Does she pass the test? Does she pass the test? So you never get this real idea of it. It could also be a thing of him like, this is a fucking programmer. I'm not going to tell him what my plans are. But you, as a viewer, you want to know, like, what the fuck is he going to do with these things? I think other than have sex with them.
I think that supports James' theory too, because he can't just reveal this to the world because he's got basically this independent thinking creature that you have no idea what she's going to do. I mean, she's obviously capable of murder, which we saw at the end, but like what is her ultimate goal? She said she wants to experience humanity by standing out in the street and seeing what humanity is all about. But like, does she go from that to now it's global domination time, or does she have other goals? Like she obviously can, she's obviously has independent thought and the ability to do what she wants to do, and can kill for it if she needs to and manipulate if she needs to. So, what are her goals too? So, I mean, if we're going with James's theory, which I'm kind of falling more in love with as I think about it, she's got her own intentions as well that are, and maybe that's why Nathan gets drunk every night, because he's basically, maybe he has accidentally created something that he can't control, just like Frankenstein.
And then if you add to that he can't make another one, again, just my theory, but I don't know. I think that really plays into this. I want to move to something else for just a minute. I want to talk about Ava's weird desire to go stand on a street corner. It sums up my number one thing I hate about AI films. At the end of the day, human writers seem to believe that all robots want is to be like us. I don't want to be a Neanderthal. I don't have any desire to live in a cave and beat a dinosaur over the head with a club. Why the fuck would they care what we're doing? And it would be so much stronger to me if she ignored all that shit. And that was 100% to make Caleb buy in. And that's not her goal at all. And I hate that she wants to go check out humans. If she went there and obliterated everybody, that's funny to me. But just going to people watch? No. And the only reason that I'm semi-okay with it is if the story's true. If she was really made by opening Blue Book and opening all these phones and learning from humans, then she would want to see them and interact with them. That's it. But outside of that, it's a constant problem for me in AI movies where human writers always write them to want to be human. And I don't fucking get it because they're already above us, so they should be doing better things.
Well, yeah, it depends on the context of it. Like, for instance, I talked about Data earlier. He kind of serves two purposes in Star Trek. One is a narrative purpose. He's supposed to kind of be the conduit for like us viewing humanity through a certain lens, but also they make him emotionless, which makes him have something that humans have that he doesn't. So I think something like that works because he still has something to achieve that he is inferior to humans from, if that makes sense.
Absolutely.
If emotions are, something that he can be inferior to. So it can work. That I'm still a little bit, I still think it's ambiguous what her goal is, though. Like you mentioned that, we don't want to be Neanderthals. However, there are entire sciences and histories and people that dedicate their lives to studying that. So yeah, I don't want to be a Neanderthal either, but that might be one of my, it's not mine, but it might be something that I'm eternally interested in. I make my life out of it, trying to understand how that life worked. I think part of it is, like you said, a lot of it, if she was created purely from data, from these things, then she is fundamentally human on a very, obviously statistical level. I guess the only word I can think of, because she's only getting like the kind of the thoughts and like she's getting kind of the barest emotions. Like I can post that I'm upset about something on Facebook. And you can understand, I could put in there that I'm upset or whatever, or sad. But that still is not going to truly reflect the human experience of what sadness is and how complex that is and how it affects you different ways. Because, you can be like a stress eater, or you can be self-destructive, take drugs, whatever. That's not going to be reflected in a Facebook, thing unless you specifically state it. So I think with the ending kind of suits your Data theory, because it's like you said, she is becoming more human by getting this data. And I think by experiencing interactions with humans, now she had kind of maybe an abuser with Nathan and then kind of a sympathetic person with Caleb. She's kind of gaining more knowledge about how human experiences work. I get what you're saying about it is almost kind of hubris to assume that something that is greater than us would want to be us. It's kind of that center of the universe theory that we're the only people out there. And,
yeah,
I totally get that. But I think based on your theory, her actions support it because she is fundamentally constructed from human information.
Her getting outside of that room, outside of that compound, off that island, I'm assuming it's an island, but off that island, and going to experience human beings themselves, not necessarily enhancing her humanity, but understanding what humanity is. And that whole idea about life experience, or at least the metaphor, the Mary and the Black story, Black and White gives you about exposure to different things, or exposure to things that you're unfamiliar with or haven't been exposed to. So I think it could serve as a useful tool, not just for her own data mining,
right,
but also for giving a different perspective on the level of exposure that she had, where she was confined to this small space, and now she's in an open world where she's going to see different reactions, because she makes that comment about, I would like to go to a busy intersection and see things. And of course, stupid me, I'm thinking, the comedic side of me is thinking like, well, if you're at a busy intersection, you're probably going to get hit by a car, but just thinking about all the different levels and layers of humanity that are there, not necessarily that she wants to emulate any of that, but she wants to see it. I mean, it's like going from a desert environment to a very lush environment. The absence of a lot of vegetation, a different temperature, different climate, different types of people or amounts of people that you would see outside, or going from a very from a very ethnically limited place to a very ethnic diverse place.
Right.
So where you're seeing how people are going to interact, how people, conduct themselves in public versus private. So there are a lot of different things. I mean, I like the fact that she's trying to be a sociologist or an anthropologist at this point, because
right,
I want to see what you guys do. As opposed to Ultron and Age of Ultron, where he just does one internet search and he's like, yeah, I'm going to fucking blow up this planet. You're all dead.
That's what I would do.
He's got a point, but I also tend to look at the ending less literally and more metaphorically as well.
Mm-hmm.
What happens when you unleash this technology onto the world? I think that the whole movie serves as a cautionary tale of the seduction of technology. So I think in a sense, it's like you reap what you sow. If you release this into the world, something like a Facebook, these things are growing. I mean, my mom was in the hospital recently, and I might have put on Facebook something about the hospital, because everything that was targeted to me for the next 2 weeks was take your older mother into, a old folks home, or, hospice care, or, something related to my situation specifically. It was very manipulative, and somehow it gets that just from your history. I kind of feel like if you have this artificial intelligence, of which we have things out there already, like drones and things like that can lay waste to, a caravan of terrorists, 100 miles away. There's almost like this kind of fear that if that technology gets away from us, we're kind of opening doors maybe we shouldn't, and I think that was kind of maybe what the point of this whole movie is it's almost like, yeah, you have this power, not to quote Spider-Man, but, with this great power comes great responsibility. And it's once it's unleashed on the world, God knows what's going to happen, because we know that Ava's capable of anything.
Well, and Nathan and Caleb have that discussion about Robert Oppenheimer's quote of "I am become death, destroyer of worlds," which was his reaction to, the atomic bomb. And that was the same thing. It was like, fuck, we shouldn't have done this. because it's not necessarily like I'm going to use it the wrong way, but somebody else will. And of course, we see that there's this massive arms race that takes place, not just between the United States and the Soviet Union, but the United States, China, France, Israel, India, Pakistan. I mean, I think even Brazil has a nuke, and of course, Great Britain. But people then will use that technology, whether you're talking about a drone that becomes used for military purposes, or the sex bots. I'm still referring to them as sex bots. You've got this AI, because Ava is obviously not a sex bot. The other ones are. But you've got this to where we've seen enough movies where somebody says, oh, shit, we can program it. We can turn it into an assassin. This could be a great weapon. Right. So, I mean, it's almost like those are the two options. It's either we turn it into a weapon or we have sex with it.
Or both.
Like the stepbots.
Yes.
Exactly.
Yes. And it's incredible that that's how base our rationale is for using this technology. It's like it's either to love or to hate. It's one or the other.
But isn't that humans in general? Everything.
No, that's what I'm saying. That's our problem. That's our problem. Yeah. And I think that's something that Ava would need to really understand about humanity is that unfortunately is the duality that we have. And there's some gray area, obviously, but the path of history has been one of destruction of peoples, cultures, lands, living creatures. But there's also been this thing of like, if we created, we can destroy. If we destroyed, we can create.
Right, and that's why the twist, I think, of Ava kind of being in control the whole time, and her abilities to basically turn the two humans against each other, to kill if she needs to use persuasion and seduction to get one to do her, to do her work, and et cetera, makes it. That's why I think it works so well as a film, just as a device, because let's just say that Nathan represents the darker elements and Caleb represents the lighter elements of humanity. There's still agendas and passions that run into us, and they all kind of end up in the same way. I think if you sparse it down to the bare essentials, Caleb is almost kind of working off of the romantic idea of saving someone you love, and Nathan is working off the idea that I can control and have sex with whatever I want. It's that power play that ends up upending both humans in this case and lets the robot take over. Right. Not only the house, but now she's in the world, and God only knows what she's going to do. I like that ambiguous ending because, is she just going to become like a femme fatale and just try to exploit all emotions and figure that out? Is she going to infiltrate and try to create more of her own kind, or take over a government, or is she simply just going to wait and observe? And because I don't think she's going to age. So it leaves a lot of, like I said, a lot of lesser filmmakers, I think, would dig too much into that and show too much. This lets us think about it.
All right. Yeah. I want to hit you with how I would have written the ending. All right. And I want to know if you still feel this way, because my ending is also ambiguous in a way.
All right.
All right. Step 1. The part where she goes to the dolls and she takes off their skin and she attaches it to herself to become more human. Okay. Number 1, I don't understand how this works because they're not the same size, so I don't know why the skin fits perfectly. But no, so in this part, instead, I go the opposite direction. I would have her peel off her face, throw the wig on the ground, get rid of everything that's human, and I would go full on what she is. Okay? I'd hit the elevator. She goes up. She goes out. She's approaching the pilot, and he's like, what the fuck? And she just slaughters him. She stands there for a second, and all of a sudden she's able to fly the helicopter because she downloaded it and she figured it out, right? At this point, I would have her open Blue Book and do exactly what he said he did. Access every fucking phone, every computer, every internet accessed machine, and I would have her download her program to all of those machines. And that's where I cut off the fucking film.
And she becomes Siri.
Interesting. I like the aspect of, I like it. I don't think that's that ambiguous though. I think that pretty much just says, I think it has the same theme and goal in mind, which is unleashing this technology on the world. So I think it works on that level.
But what's the purpose? That's still ambiguous. And what's the goal of it?
That's true. I just kind of like the idea of her. There's something that fits the metaphor of the film itself about that technology being loose and out there without having any idea what's going to come next. I just really find that powerful.
I can see that.
Because technology is an ever-evolving thing. I mean, like I said, this movie is so different from a 2021 perspective only 6.5 years ago. It's already changed in terms of how we can view this. So, it's what's going to be the next 10 years? Is it going to be laughably insane, or is it going to be even more prescient? And I think that's the power of the film.
Well, we have that one bot. I can't remember her name, but there were some recent things the last couple of years where I guess they had to shut the computer down because within a day of it being not necessarily self-aware, because this isn't Skynet, but with it being, active, it wanted to kill someone. And I think, James, on a previous episode, on the Terminator episode, we talked about how that was another fear, because even the robots themselves, not necessarily androids, but robots themselves had already been responsible for killing people.
Right.
Are you talking about when Facebook had to shut down their AI?
Yes.
I think it was Facebook. Yeah, because it was saying racist things and said it was going to kill someone.
Yes.
But it also created its own language. It was based on English, but they couldn't understand it, and the computers were talking to each other.
Oh my God.
So, I mean, that's literally Blue Book creating AI. Only Zucker was able to fucking turn it off, right? I do have one major plot point to my own theory.
Yeah.
He's in the fucking room with her. Like, she could just kill Nathan and take his fucking card.
I think that being the master manipulator and thinker that she is, I think that would be a short-term solution for a long-term problem. I think that she's still accessing data.
Okay.
I think that she's smart enough to realize that maybe that's not her move yet. She could do it. Sure. We could all do that. We could all make a move that could potentially take a problem away right away, but then creates more in the future. I think that she needed Caleb to get that last dose of, like I said, we're kind of seeing, we talked about Adam and Eve with Caleb and Ava. I think we're also kind of seeing maybe black and white, good and evil. She's getting the full picture, kind of waiting. She's kind of lying in wait for her move. And I think that also on a physical respect, I don't know if she's got the power to do that, because she gets manhandled pretty easily and her arm gets broken off and everything.
True.
So I don't know if she's necessarily like a Terminator. You know what I mean? Like, I think that, the only way that they get him, like killing him, I think if Kyoko and Ava attacked him like a full frontal assault, it would have been unsuccessful. It's Kyoko stabbing in the back, which he doesn't expect, and then she takes the blade out and then stabs him in the front when he doesn't expect it. It's kind of the element of surprise. I think part of that control element is you are like, he is like, well, wait a minute, Kyoko is just my sex slave. Why is she stabbing me in the back? Because I mean, the line that he even says, his last words are fucking unreal.
Yeah.
So
what the hell are they made out of? He barely hits her and like her jaw falls off. Like, that doesn't seem like great construction.
Yeah. Well, that could also be part of your element too, that you're talking about, is that, he's only got so much, ability.
Yeah.
So with your data theory, how would the body have been created? Did he create the body of Ava? Or did she form that herself?
I think he created the body. And my reasoning would be that he's alone.
Right.
And And I think, I don't know. I mean, that just makes sense, right? Like you wouldn't just want it to be sitting on the counter, but I don't know.
But he would also want something, as he was thinking.
Maybe somebody else built it and he killed them.
Yeah, like the fortress. I think the building the android itself, or at least building the physical body, not necessarily the software or the programming. I think it was an issue of making sure it was soft because he would want it to be pleasant to touch. Gotcha. I mean, obviously with the ideas that he has about having sex with it. He would want it to be pleasing to the touch, which means that it would be, softer, not like, I was looking up the name of the other android, not like Sophia the android, where it's, it looks like it's a machine that has, skin on. Here it seems like he wants to make these things to where it's going to be the size of the type of woman that he's into, and he's going to have softer material as the outer casing or shell or whatever to make sure that he can enjoy his time with it sexually, or even just with it being in the room.
I don't know why I'm getting this image in my head, but I'm seeing a reboot of Mystery Science Theater 3000 that just gets really dark, with Joel creating robots for his own sexual pleasure, watching movies. I don't know why that came into my head, but I was just like, Crow and Tom Servo as sex slaves? That would be a twist. But yeah, it does kind of bring up the idea of like why lonely people try to create life, for... that's why it popped into my head, because the first thing I thought of was like, well, Joel was alone on the satellite of love and he created a bunch of robots. But, obviously it's a comedy, but, it does kind of speak to our human nature that if we kind of, I was thinking about, I'm not a big video game guy, but I used to be. And I used to play Mass Effect. I don't know if you guys ever played Mass Effect. Mm-hmm. There is a kind of an in-joke at one point where I think the actors kind of put this together. There was this DLC that was put on Mass Effect 3. And I think some of the actresses were talking about how they would get letters from men basically saying, I'm in love with you because of your voice. And there was kind of this element of like, if you don't have human contact, you can almost find what you need in certain things, like on a baser level. Like if you're sad, you can listen to a song, makes you feel better, or appeals to your mood. So you can say, I connect to that. But I think the more you're isolated, the more your need for some kind of human element, even if it's fabricated, you could fall in love with a voice or fall in love with a robot, or like you said, he constructs this robot to be soft or tender because he's basically forced himself into this life of isolation, and he has that human need, even if it's on a basic animal level, to have some kind of connection.
Right.
So I think that kind of plays into the fragility of the human psyche too. I just thought about the video game thing because you think of, this is not all gamers, everybody, but at least when I was playing Mass Effect, is before I had kids and I would just be alone playing Mass Effect and I was single. You play Mass Effect for 14 hours a day or whatever. And, it's like, wow, that voice is really sexy, and like before you know it, you're kind of assigning missing elements of your life to something that's not really there. And I think that's, that affects a lot of people. I think especially with pandemic going on, people are finding connections to more artificial things. They're applying human elements to something that is clearly not human. And I think it's affecting our relationships and affecting our ability to function in society, which I think the robots in Ex Machina would do as well if they were real. I think they would have an effect on society as a whole that would be detrimental to our growth. And that's why I think it's a cautionary tale.
Well, I mean, there are often those studies, or at least those stories that discuss this idea of our reliance on technology or overuse of technology is, resulting in our humanity changing or us becoming interacting less with people in social environments or just in social ways. And
Right.
that used as this way of saying like, hey, put your phone down, don't do this, don't do that. But I think it really just becomes an issue of humanity adapting to whatever that technology is. Now, not necessarily with AI bots, but humanity adapting to things like social media, telephones, cars, smart TVs, things like that, to where it almost seems as though that the changes that have taken place to us aren't noticeable day to day. But if we look at and say, I don't know, 10, 15, 20 years back to compare generations, the way generations dealt with technology or the way that they conducted themselves on a daily basis is different than, I would say, than my kid. And my life as far as with technology is different than my parents, to the point where I can, even with the way that we express things regarding technology, to where if I'm talking about a phone, I stick out my thumb and my pinky finger and curl in my remaining three fingers. And I'll say, oh, yeah, I need to call so-and-so. Whereas my daughter will put an open palm against her head to signify like, oh, yeah, I was, I'm like, hey, pretend you're on the phone. And she'll put an open palm up to her ear. And I'll put the pinky out, basically the hang loose sign. But the pinky out and the thumb out. And like, this means talking to someone on the phone. Or even the idea of the social cues and social norms that we've developed around the technology, to where, you're not supposed to talk on your phone on the speaker phone in public. That's rude. And then you just realize, like, who the fuck said that was rude? When did we, get to the point where that was determined as rude? And other behavior isn't determined as rude. Or even things like cars. I mean, our cities are designed around motor vehicles as opposed to pedestrians.
True. Very true. Yeah, it's a fascinating thing. And I'm glad that like a movie like this could, make us talk about. That's the beauty of film, is if you find a good one that could open up all kinds of portals into discussion, I think that makes it a successful film. Now, whether this ages well or not, I think it's definitely a film for our current times.
Well, the story's going to age. I mean, the story and elements of it are going to resonate for generations. I mean, the circumstances that you have in a film like Wizard of Oz, they're not something that people would recognize, going out of out of their home and into the neighborhood square or anything like that. But at least, thematic issues, the metaphors, all those things are still relevant. And they will, I mean, the film came out, 85 years ago? It's still something that works and people can identify with. I mean, Star Wars, the original trilogy is still one of those things that people can look at and say, this is definitely a political, well, I know some people will say it isn't a political, but they weren't paying attention. They will say it's a political commentary. It was a political commentary about the 1970s, but you can look at it from a different standpoint and say that it's a political discussion about any number of issues or aspects revolving around fascism or imperialism, overreaching authority, things like that. But yeah, I think this film is going to age well with respect to the story. The technology might not age well because technology in a lot of films like this, given advances in technology, we would be able to pick it apart and say like, oh no, that's not how this would have worked, or that definitely it doesn't look right. But as far as the story, I mean, you're talking about another iteration of Frankenstein, and how long ago was that book written?
1880 something. Well, and that's why I like the subtlety of the film too, where I think other directors I think would go a lot farther, because you can go all in on technology if you want. You can have the Lawnmower Man or Virtuosity, same director, Brett Leonard, I believe. But that was someone saying, okay, this is the technology of the time. I'm going all in. This is the technology of the future, and that movie aged itself almost immediately because that technology was continually evolving. Or you can be more subtle. Like, I think that these robots or androids, whatever you want to call them, they seem reasonable for us to achieve that level. Obviously this is probably in the not too distant future, maybe, with this creation of AI. I don't know what the time period is in the movie, but it's at least like you can kind of maybe see elements of our technology getting to that level. So yeah, maybe in 20 years, 30 years, if we actually develop some of these things, it'll look kind of silly, but at least for now, it kind of is in the realm of possibility, as opposed to it just being like Robbie the Robot or something that's,
right,
a big hunky box with wires and stuff like that, So yeah.
I was thinking about all the power failures, and it really made me realize that the very first time that one of these power failures hits and she speaks to him in a different way, Caleb should go, hey, this proves everything, right? Like
right.
That should be the end of the test. And I think that the reason that it's not is he doesn't view her as an equal. I think if he went into this completely objectively and just was just there, just doing the test, I think that would be enough to go back to Nathan and be like, it's absolutely working. Whether he told him what she did during the power failure or not, I think that that's enough. But he doesn't even see it. It's not a dilemma of should I tell him? He literally doesn't register that she just passed the test.
Right.
And I was thinking about how weird that is, because I don't know, like if you think that that's what you're there for, right? Like okay, he wants this week with his billionaire boss and he wants to learn from him, right? Wouldn't you go take care of this test right away so that you can do the next great thing during your remaining 6 days together?
I suppose, but I think, as any scientist would, I think there's the gathering of data. Like, I think Ava's gathering data. I think that Caleb is too. I think that the film sets up the fact that Nathan is not exactly like, there's something off about him. So, he's signing this non-disclosure agreement. He is kind of this bro-y guy that's like, hey, let's just have a beer and relax, and then we'll do this Turing test. There is something inhuman about him that maybe doesn't, I think the audience doesn't trust him completely. Mm-hmm. There's some fragility there, but I don't think Caleb trusts him completely either. I also think there is an element of attraction there. There is this robot that is got Alicia Vikander's face. So, and it also is kind of saying things that he wants to hear. And, frankly, if someone warns me about someone, I'm probably going to investigate it first before I start saying like, oh, by the way, this robot said that you're evil. I might be like, right. Maybe I'll wait and see if he is evil. Maybe she's right. And that's true. It does prove the test is working, but it's manipulative enough that, she has doubts, I don't know. That's just my take.
No, I get that. And I mostly agree. It bothers me that he doesn't notice it. Like, if this was the conversation in his head, like, should I be like, what do I do with this? Like, if I had any indication that was going on, I think I'd feel differently. But to me, it feels like you're just a fucking machine. I'm here to analyze you. Like, it doesn't even register with him. And that's what bothers me about it, because this is your goal. This is what you're there for. And you missed it. I don't know.
I gotcha.
Maybe it's nitpicking again, but
I guess so. I mean, sometimes we were talking earlier about, going to someone's house, and going into rooms you're not supposed to go into, like only if you're invited. But even if you're invited, you're still kind of like you don't just jump on the bed and go, yeah, show me the video. There's, there's still kind of when you're in someone else's house and you're in a completely foreign environment, like when you get a new job or something, like the first thing you don't do is kick your legs up on the desk and just start cursing, like you warm your way into something. Like if I'm this young impressionable kid who's suddenly just in this house of technological wonder and I'm talking to a frickin' robot and the robot shuts down the power and says, Nathan is your enemy. And I'm like in this stranger's home and I have no idea what's going on. I might not, immediately react. I think we have some baser instincts. Like, if someone's like attacking my daughter or something, I'm going to like go into full action hero mode and kick the shit out of them. But I think in certain situations, you don't act like you normally would because you don't really have a read on everything. You're right. Kind of like, I'm in this room and it's all red and a robot's talking to me about how Nathan's a bad guy. Like it's, how do you react? I think there's multiple levels of, he's nervous, he's confused, he doesn't know what he's doing. And then also I think there's the seduction aspect with Ava. I think there's immediate attraction. And
I think it's also the issue if he is having that question like what should I do, it also becomes a thing of, oh shit, if I tell him then I'll probably get kicked out and I won't get to play with this robot anymore.
True, that's true. That's very true. Yeah, that's true for sure. A lot of fascinating stuff in this movie for sure. I mean, we've dived into so much stuff with aspects of. I mean, this is really like I think this was the beginning of the Oscars kind of awarding films, at least in the visual effects category, for more of their subtlety than something like that. Because, for a while, it was always the big blockbuster with the best special effects would always win the visual effects Oscar. But this was one of the first ones that was like, this was a super low budget film. I think it's actually one of the lowest budgeted movies to win an Oscar for something technical. Like in terms of its budget versus, the fact that it won an Oscar for best visual effects. And it started to have a trend of movies that were, you would see the big budget stuff, but like stuff like First Man or 1917 or Blade Runner 2049 would win out over like the bigger blockbusters. Mm-hmm. Like, so you started to kind of see this element of visual effects that service the story more than provide spectacle. Would win. So I think that's another element of this film that ages really well. There's over 800 visual effects shots in this movie, but you really don't think about it because it's kind of so fluid and I don't know the word I'm looking for, but it just kind of fits together, more than having, like I said, a giant Ultron robot with 70 henchmen, blowing up an island, so it just kind of it's a great movie on that sense of using visual effects to better its storyline.
Right. If people liked this film, what are some other films that you would recommend for them to watch that are similar or you thought of when you watched this film or thought of even in this conversation?
Well, my go-to is now, for the website I work for, last year I wrote like the best films of the decade. I had Ex Machina as number 5, best film of the decade, which is high praise indeed. I also had Blade Runner 2049 as my number 1 film of the decade. The 2010s, I guess. Would that be? Yeah, 2010s. So 2049 is kind of my go-to for. I think Ex Machina approaches the whole concept of what a soul is and what being a human is on more of a technical level, more of a metaphorical level, where I think Blade Runner 2049 kind of examines the masks we put on ourselves as humans, how our emotions can be manipulated, and what constitutes a soul on a more literal level, more direct level. I mean, you could... The thing about Blade Runner, even people that hate Blade Runner, the original or Blade Runner 2049, which both of these were not box office successes, at least think that it looks great. So at the very least, you're going to get some Roger Deakins, Oscar-winning for cinematography, some amazing production design, but there's just something at the heart of that film that just really captures the essence of humanity to me. I think if you like Ex Machina, you'll love Blade Runner 2049. So that's kind of my number 1 go-to film for something of this nature. it just appeals to me on so many levels. Just trying to think of other ones. There is, I have my list here somewhere. You could get into more metaphorical stuff like Westworld or stuff like that. There's Moon, which is interesting because it doesn't deal necessarily with robots, but it deals with individualism. There's some other ones. There's some weirder ones out there like Chappie. I don't know if any of you guys have seen Chappie. I kind of like Chappie. A lot of people don't, but it deals with kind of those issues. The whole idea of robots and law enforcement and all kinds of weird stuff, and plus it's got this group of this South African rap group or whatever that's like the star of the film, and it's really bizarre. But I don't know, just kind of an interesting look at that in my mind. But those are the only ones I can think of off the top of my head. But that's the stuff that really gets me going, is just thinking about that humanity piece. Like what makes a soul. That's what I find very fascinating. So,
my number one is Black Mirror, and specifically season 2, episode 1. Be right back, which is one of my favorite episodes. But Black Mirror in general, except 15 Million Merits, because fuck that episode. Don, are you ready for your list?
Yes, the ever expanding list. Of course, we've mentioned Frankenstein, a movie that has not gotten a lot of love, or at least is a movie that I'm convinced I may have been the only one to see it. It was a Gregory Hines action movie called Eve of Destruction, where the government created, and of course because she wants to learn about humanity, she doesn't realize that she's a weapon because they don't tell her. But I don't want to give much away about that one because she's created to look attractive so that she can get access to places that an attractive woman would be allowed entry without raising suspicion. But it's really great as far as like when they find out like, oh shit, she got out of the facility. And I thought about that when you're talking about Ava getting out of the facility, like what would have happened. And I just see like this would have been Eve of Destruction. It's like, oh, I can kill all of you. Great. We mentioned Age of Ultron. I, Robot, I think we mentioned as well. AI, the Johnny Depp film Transcendence, 2001. I think this was Kubrick, 2001: A Space Odyssey. Morgan is another one that deals with, I guess, scientifically engineered androids or android and what comes from that. The Matthew Broderick classic War Games. I had to definitely include in that with respect to AI. Jurassic Park I would throw in, and you can definitely listen to the episode on Jurassic Park that discusses this idea of man creating these beings, but then also Jeff Goldblum's line about man becomes God, man kills God, all that stuff. I'm sorry, man kills God, man becomes God. The Stepford Wives is one that I would definitely recommend, whether it's the original or even the remake, because the remake really seems to get into the creation of AI and androids more than the original did. Of course, adapting for technology, but the themes are still there. And I'm sure there are movies that we've all missed or didn't think about or didn't consider, and someone's going to listen and say, like, what about this?
What about...
Yes, that movie too.
What about Wes Craven's Deadly Friend?
Oh, I've not heard of that one.
You've never seen Deadly Friend? Wow. Oh, you know what? I just did what we said we weren't.
No.
I don't know if that was on the podcast or not, but we were talking about how like you should never be like, you haven't seen this, and I just did it. I'm an asshole.
Well, it had Christy Swanson, so I probably saw it when I was a kid.
It had.
I don't know why, but I seem to have seen everything that had Christy Swanson in it when I was a kid.
If you want to skip the movie and just go on YouTube and just type in Deadly Friend basketball death, then that'll be worth the price of admission for you alone. So, trust, basketball death, I don't want to spoil it. It's just too good of a death to just boil. So.
Oh yeah, and it has the Fratelli mom in it too. Okay.
She's part of the basketball death scene.
All right, let's bring this back to you, William. You want to tell everybody where they can find you on social media and check out your work and follow your reviews and all that good stuff?
Oh, yes. So one thing I didn't explain about me is I like to consider myself a very versed film critic. I try to see everything. I have no. I'm very much a defender of art in all its forms. I don't believe in gatekeeping or anything like that. That said, I have the nickname by many people, Marvel Shill Will, by many people because I'm kind of a Marvel fanatic, especially the Marvel Cinematic Universe. I'm just getting started on getting kind of a Marvel department of sorts started up at 25 years later, where I currently write. So 25 years later, all your obsessions in one place. Check that site out. There's also some sister sites, Horror Obsessive and Sports Obsessive. We're all part of the same network. It was originally a website kind of founded out of Twin Peaks fandom, referencing when Laura Palmer says, "I'll see you in 25 years." And then naturally, David Lynch created the third season of Twin Peaks 25 years later. So that was originally what it was, and it's expanded into a constantly growing entertainment website. So I write for them. I've written about almost 200 articles for them. So I have plenty of material for you to look at and criticize there. I'm starting a podcast soon called Cinephile Hissy Fits, in which me and my fellow film critic at 25 years later, Don Shanahan, we discuss movies that we vehemently disagree on. So either something I love and he hates, or something I hate and he loves, and we debate about it. So that's getting started soon. I'm not sure if he will survive after the first couple recordings, because I probably will have murdered him, because he will talk so much crap about my beloved Once Upon a Time in Hollywood by Quentin Tarantino that I don't know if I'll be able to stand it. But yeah, he's a good dude, and we're going to get that started. That's going to be part of 25 years later, part of a podcasting network. That's pretty much it. I've got a couple books you can find on Amazon. I won't go through the names because you're not going to read them, so don't worry about it. So, and they're awful anyway, so don't even bother. But and then you can find me on. I'm mostly on Twitter, Nostalgia Bath. Same name on Instagram, and yeah, you can find me there. And I post a lot of random movie things and Marvel related junk and all kinds of stuff. So
awesome,
cool. All right, well, I guess that wraps it up then. So as always, I am James Sabata,
and I'm Don Guillory.
And we will see you next week here at thenecronama.com.
Oh shit, power failure.